Morning. In our last class, we were discussing the idea of frames of reference and the types of motion. I have told you, in order to describe the motion of an object, we need some fixed point or fixed location. That fixed point or fixed location with respect to which motion of an object is described is called as a frame of reference, right? So an object may be at rest when you see from one frame of reference, and the same object may appear to be in motion if you see it from some other frame of reference. So whether an object is at rest or an object is in motion depends upon the frame of reference from which you are looking into that object. So that's the concept of frame of reference. Also, I have told you about the types of motion. There are basically three types of motion: motion in one dimension, motion in two dimension, and motion in three dimension. And I was telling you about motion in one dimension. See, what is motion in one dimension ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ when the position, when only one position coordinate of a particle changes with time. When only one position coordinate of a particle changes with time, then we say that body has one dimensional motion. ಯಾವಾಗ ಒಂದು ಬಾಡಿ ಒಂದೇ ಒಂದು ಪೊಸಿಷನ್ ಕೋಆರ್ಡಿನೇಟ್ ಚೇಂಜ್ ಆಗ್ತಿರ್ತದೋ ಟೈಮ್ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಅವಾಗ ಆ ಬಾಡಿ ಒನ್ ಡೈಮೆನ್ಷನಲ್ ಮೋಷನ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. We'll just try to understand what does it mean. Suppose this is a Cartesian coordinate system. This is x-axis, this is y-axis, and this is z-axis. We'll describe the position of the particle at any instant of time with respect to this fixed point called origin. We'll describe the motion of an object or position of an object with respect to this fixed location origin. Let us suppose here is an ant. This is an ant, and at time t is equals to 0, the ant is at 1 meter from the origin. See, the position of the ant is 1 meter from the origin at time t is equals to 0. At time t is equals to 1 second, let us suppose the ant is at a distance of 2 meter from the origin. Ant is at a distance of 2 meter from the origin. At time t is equals to 2 seconds, the ant is at a position of 3 meter from the origin. See, with respect to time, the position of the ant is remaining the same or it is changing. First decide whether the position of the ant is changing with respect to time and surroundings or it's remaining the same. In time process, the surrounding will be this origin. For the ant, the surrounding will be this origin. However, the position of the ant is changing with respect to time and its surroundings. So we say the ant is in motion. We say the ant is in motion. However, what type of motion is possessed by the ant? Whether the ant is moving in one dimension, or it's moving in two dimensions, or it's moving in three dimensions. That must be decided. Now, we'll try to specify the position coordinates for this ant. Position coordinates for at this position, the coordinates will be 1, 0, 0. Andre, this ant is at a distance of 1 meter along x-axis, 0 meter along y-axis, and 0 meter along z-axis. Position coordinates are always represented as x, y, z. Position along x-axis, this is position coordinate along y-axis, and this is position coordinate along z-axis. 1, 0, 0 ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ the ant is at a distance of 1 meter along x-axis from the origin. It's at a distance of 0 meter along y-axis measured from the origin. It's along 0 meter along z-axis as measured from the origin. That means ant has traveled a distance of 1 meter only along x-axis. There is no motion of the ant along y-axis. There is no motion of the ant on z-axis. Andre ant y-axis ಮೇಲೆ ಮೂವ್ ಆಗಿಲ್ಲ, z-axis ಮೇಲೆ ಮೂವ್ ಆಗಿಲ್ಲ. Ant is moving only along x-axis. Okay. We'll specify the coordinates of this position 2 comma 0 comma 0, this position 3 comma 0 comma 0. If the ant is at this position, it will be 4 comma 0 comma 0. Now tell me how many number of position coordinates of the ant are changing with respect to time. There are actually 3 coordinates, x, y, z. Tell me how many coordinates of position of the ant are changing with time. ಎಷ್ಟು position coordinates change ಆಗ್ತದೆ time ಜೊತೆಗೆ. ಯಾವ coordinate change ಆಗ್ತದೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀರಾ? Can you tell me which of the 3 coordinates are changing? X coordinate, y coordinate and z coordinate. Which coordinate is changing with time? X coordinate is changing. This means the ant is moving or ant is changing its position only along x-axis. Ant is changing its position only along x-axis. Ant doesn't have any motion along y-axis, nor ant has motion along z-axis. Ant has motion only along x-axis. However, can you tell me the path of the ant? Can you tell me the path of the ant? Path hagade. How is the path of the ant? What kind of a path? What kind of a path is traced by the ant? Ant the path hagade. Path antandre you need to tell the shape of the route followed by the ant. Shape of the route. Path antandre shape of the route followed by the ant. Ant follow ಮಾಡಿರೋ route the shape ಹೇಗಿದೆ? It's a straight line. It's a straight line. Very good. ಹಾಗಾದ್ರೆ we say the ant is moving along a straight line. Ant is moving along a straight line. Hagadre if a particle is moving along a straight line, tell me how many position coordinates of it will be changing? How many position coordinates of it will be changing? If a particle is moving along a straight line, how many position coordinates of it will be changing? Only one coordinate will be changing. Hagadre this is how we define motion in one dimension. Motion in one dimension how define ಮಾಡಬಹುದು? An object is said to be in one dimensional motion. An object is said to be one dimensional motion if only one position coordinate of it is changing. If only one position coordinate of the particle is changing with time, we say that particle has one dimensional motion. We say that particle has one dimensional motion. Is that clear? ಅಥವಾ ಬಹಳ ಸಿಂಪಲ್ ಆಗಿ motion of a particle along straight line. Motion of a particle along straight line is called one dimensional motion. If a particle is moving along straight line, only one coordinate of it will be changing with time. However, if only one coordinate changes with time, then we say motion of that object is one dimensional motion. So you can define in either ways. One motion in one dimension, ಎರಡು ರೀತಿ define ಮಾಡಬಹುದು. An object is said to be in one dimensional motion if only one coordinate or if only one position coordinate changes with time. ಒಂದು ಪಾರ್ಟಿಕಲ್ ಒಂದೇ ಒಂದು ಪೊಸಿಷನ್ ಕೋಆರ್ಡಿನೇಟ್ ಟೈಮ್ ಜೊತೆ ಚೇಂಜ್ ಆಗ್ತಿದ್ರೆ we said that object is in one dimensional motion. Or you can just say an object moving along straight line is in one dimensional motion. Motion of an object along straight line is called as one dimensional motion. Is it clear? Is it clear? Motion of an object along a straight line is called one dimensional motion. Example hege helbodu. An ant walking along a straight line. An ant walking along a straight line is an example for motion in one dimension. A train moving along a straight track. A train moving along a straight track. Train moving along a straight track is an example for one dimensional motion. Suppose this is the track. Suppose this is the track. We'll fix the coordinate axis here. We'll fix the coordinate axis here. This is x-axis. This is z-axis. Okay, this is x-axis. This is y-axis, and this is z-axis. Let us suppose the train is traveling along a straight line. Tell me how many coordinates of position of the train changes with time? If it travels along straight track, tell me how many coordinates of the position of train changes with time? How many position coordinates of train change with time? Okay, at this position coordinates, the origin. Origin, the train may be now at 1 kilometer, 0, 0. Train is traveling only along x-axis. In ಮೇಲೆ ಹೋಗ್ತಿಲ್ಲಲ್ಲ train. ಹೀಗೂ ಬರ್ತಿಲ್ಲ. Train is traveling only along x-axis. ಇಲ್ಲಿ train ಬಂದ್ರೆ 2 kilometer, 0, 0. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಬಂದ್ರೆ 3 kilometer, 0, 0. ಹಾಗಾದ್ರೆ only one position coordinate of the train is changing with time. So we say the train moving along straight track is in one dimensional motion, or it is considered to be the example for one dimensional motion. Can you tell me what kind of motion does this chalk has now? This is an object held at certain height. Idan arth anta ankodri. Take my palm to be the earth. Take my palm to be the earth. Idanne arth anta ankodri. The object is now raised a little above the earth. I'll release this object from this height. ಈ height ಇಂದ ನಾನು ಇವಾಗ ಈ ಆಬ್ಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ನ ರಿಲೀಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ. ಹಾಗಾದ್ರೆ tell me the nature of motion of the object. I released that object from certain height. I released an object from certain height. Tell me the nature of the path followed by the object. Tell me the nature of the path followed by the object. Nature of path. Path hengittu? Path hengittu? Straight line. Very good. Tell me which coordinate of position of this particle is changing with time. Which position coordinate? Which position coordinate is changing with time? Very good. Y coordinate of position is changing with time. However, at this point, we can write coordinates as 0, 5 meter, 0. ಅಂದ್ರೆ x axis ಇಂದ 0 ಮೀಟರ್ ಆಗದೆ, y axis ಮೇಲೆ origin ಇಂದ 5 ಮೀಟರ್ ಅಷ್ಟು ದೂರದಾಗದೆ, z axis ಇಂದ origin ಮೇಲೆ origin ಇಂದ 0 ಮೀಟರ್ ಡಿಸ್ಟೆನ್ಸ್ ಆಗದೆ. Now its position will be 0, 4, 0, 0, 3, 0, 0, 2, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 0. Origin hatra bantu. So an object released from certain height travels along straight line, so it must be an example for one dimensional motion. It's an example for one dimensional motion. So if you are asked to write an example for one dimensional motion, write the examples like motion of a train along a straight track, motion of car along a straight track, motion of ant along a straight path, or motion of an object released from certain height. If you release an object from certain height, it follows a straight line path, so its motion is one dimensional motion. We must be now able to tell how many coordinates of position of that object is changing. Nimage adu identify madlikke barbeku, how many coordinates of position of that object are changing, adanna identify madlikke barbeku indale. Is that clear? Is the idea of one dimensional motion clear? Is the idea of one dimensional motion clear? An object is said to be moving in one dimension if only one position coordinate changes with time, or an object moving along straight line is said to have motion in one dimension. So this is regarding motion in one dimension. Next we'll try to understand motion in two dimensions. What is meant by motion in two dimensions? That is to be understood. See, it's similar to motion in one dimension. One dimensional motion nage particle to one position coordinate matra change ಆಗ್ತಿದೆ. In case of two dimensional motion, two position coordinates of the particle should be changing with time. We'll try to understand this with an example. Suppose this is your carom board. This is the carom board. So this is the carom board. Okay. We'll consider this as in order to describe motion of any object, we need to fix a coordinate system. We call it as the frame of reference. So we'll fix the coordinate system here. We generally consider Cartesian coordinate system for describing motion. Let us suppose this is the origin. Let us suppose this is the origin. Andre ಇಲ್ಲಿ x coordinate 0 ಇರುತ್ತದೆ, y coordinate 0 ಇರುತ್ತದೆ. ಆಯ್ತಾ? Let this be the x axis and let this be the y axis. Let us suppose here is the coin of the carom. The carom coin ಅಂತ ಅನ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ. If I strike this carom coin along x axis or along horizontal direction, the carom coin moves this way. Can you tell me what kind of motion does the carom coin now have? If I just strike the coin along horizontal direction, the carom coin moves along the x-axis. What kind of motion does it have? One-dimensional motion. Very good. If I strike the carom coin vertically upwards, if I strike the carom coin vertically upwards, can you tell me how many position coordinates of the carom coin changes? If I strike it vertically upwards, how many position coordinates of the carom coin changes? ಎಷ್ಟು coordinates change ಆಗ್ತವೆ? ಮತ್ತೆ only one coordinate change. Only one coordinate changes. So again, its motion along straight line. Suppose if I strike the carom coin obliquely. Suppose if I strike the carom coin obliquely, andre I do not strike the carom coin along x-axis, nor I strike the carom coin along y-axis. Instead, I strike this carom coin. I strike this carom coin at an angle with the x-axis. E is strike mark. This is how I strike the carom coin. And the carom coin starts moving in this direction. This is the path of the carom coin. When I strike the carom coin at an angle with the x-axis, heat strike ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ the carom coin starts moving in this direction. Now, tell me how many coordinates are required to specify the position of the carom at this location. ಈ ಲೊಕೇಶನ್ ಹತ್ರ carom coin ಗೆ ಎಷ್ಟು coordinates ಇರ್ತವೆ? How many coordinates will be there for this coin at this location? ಎರಡು coordinates ಇರ್ತವೆ. ಈ position coordinate at this position, I write the coordinates of the coin as 1, 1. I write the coordinates of this position of the coin as 1, 1. ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಈ ಕಾಯಿನ್ ಎಲ್ಲಿದೆ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ x axis ಮೇಲೆ origin ಇಂದ 1 ಮೀಟರ್ ದೂರದಲ್ಲಿ. From the origin along the x axis, the carom coin is at a distance of 1 meter. Okay. From the origin, I travel a distance of 1 meter on the x axis. Will I find it? Will I find the coin at this location? Will I find the coin at this location? Will I find the coin at this location? I travel a distance of 1 meter along the x axis from the origin. Origin in the 1 meter distance travel ಆಗಿಲ್ಲ. I have traveled a distance of 1 meter along the x axis from the origin. Will I find the coin at this location? No. ಮತ್ತೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಏನು ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ? ಇಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಏನು ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ, in order to find the location or in order to find the coin from here, what is to be done? ಇಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಮತ್ತೆ ಏನು ಮಾಡಬೇಕು? ಇಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಮತ್ತೆ 1 meter y axis ಮೇಲೆ travel ಆಗಬೇಕು. You have to travel a distance of 1 meter along y axis. Along x axis, you have to travel a distance of 1 meter from the origin, and from here you have to travel a distance of 1 meter along y axis. Then you will get the location of the coin. However, how many coordinates are required to specify the position of this coin? Two position coordinates are required. However, when I strike this coin in this direction, at time t is equals to 1 second, the position of the coin was 1, 1. At time t is equals to 2 seconds, the position of the coin is 2, 2. At time t is equal to 3 seconds, position of the coin is 3, 3, and at time t is equal to 4 seconds, position of the coin is 4, 4. Hagadre, tell me how many position coordinates of the coin is changing with respect to time? How many position coordinates of the coin is changing with respect to time? Two position coordinates are changing with respect to time. Which are they? Which are they? Which are they? X coordinate as well as Y coordinate. Hagadre, what kind of motion is possessed by this carom coin? What kind of motion is possessed by this carom coin? What kind of motion is possessed by this carom coin? The carom coin is now possessing two-dimensional motion. Carom coin is now possessing two-dimensional motion. ಹಾಗಾದ್ರೆ ನಿಮ್ ಕೇರಂ ಕಾಯಿನ್ ಗೆ ಎಷ್ಟು ಆಕ್ಸೆಸ್ ಇರ್ತವೆ? ನಿಮ್ ಕೇರಂ ಬೋರ್ಡ್ ಇರ್ತವೆ, ಕೇರಂ ಬೋರ್ಡ್ ಗೆ ಎಷ್ಟು ಆಕ್ಸೆಸ್ ಫಿಕ್ಸ್ ಮಾಡಬಹುದು ನಾವು? ಕೇರಂ ಬೋರ್ಡ್ ಮೇಲೆ ಎಷ್ಟು ಆಕ್ಸೆಸ್ ಇಮ್ಯಾಜಿನ್ ಮಾಡಬಹುದು? ಎರಡೇ ಆಕ್ಸೆಸ್, x axis and then y axis. If I can get some okay, you can just imagine this as your carom board. ಇದನ್ನೇ ನಿಮ್ carom board ಅಂತ ಅನ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ, ಸಣ್ಣದಾದ ಅಂತ ಅನ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ carom board. ಇದನ್ನ you can treat it as x axis and this you can treat it as y axis. ಹಾಗಾದ್ರೆ ಇದ್ರ ಮೇಲೆ ಇಲ್ಲೊಂದು ಆಬ್ಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಅದೇ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಎಷ್ಟು ಕೋಆರ್ಡಿನೇಟ್ಸ್ ಇರ್ತಾವೆ? there will be only two coordinates. ಸರ್ ಇದು ಥಿಕ್ನೆಸ್ ಕೂಡ ಅದಲ್ಲ, ಇದೊಂದು ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ದಪ್ಪ ಅದಲ್ಲ. ಹಾಗಾದ್ರೆ ಲೆಂತ್ ಆಯ್ತು, ದಿಸ್ ಇಸ್ ಲೆಂತ್, this is breadth and this is height. ಹಾಗಾದ್ರೆ 3 dimensions ಅಲ್ಲ. Okay, we'll take some other object. Yes, I have a better object here. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡಿ, ಈ ಆಬ್ಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಲೆಂತ್ ಅದೇ, ಬ್ರೆಡ್ತ್ ಅದೇ, ಹೈಟ್ ಕೂಡ ಅದೇ, ಕರೆಕ್ಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲ? ಈ ಆಬ್ಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಗೆ ಎಷ್ಟು ಡೈಮೆನ್ಷನ್ಸ್ ಅವೆ? How many dimensions does this object possess? How many dimensions does this object possess? ಎಷ್ಟು ಡೈಮೆನ್ಷನ್ಸ್ ಅವೆ? 3 ಅಲ್ಲ? ನಾನು ಇದನ್ನ ಬರೀ 2 dimensions ಅಂತ ಕನ್ಸಿಡರ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ. though it has 3 dimensions, ನಿಮ್ ಕೇರಂ ಬೋರ್ಡ್ ಕೂಡ ಇದೇ ರೀತಿ ಕಾಣಿಸ್ತದೆ. ನಿಮ್ ಕೇರಂ ಬೋರ್ಡ್ ಕೂಡ ಇದೇ ರೀತಿ ಪ್ಲೇನ್ ಸರ್ಫೇಸ್ ಕಾಣಿಸ್ತದೆ. ನಾನು ಇದನ್ನ ಬರೀ 2 dimensional ಆಬ್ಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀನಿ. ಯಾಕೆ ಗೊತ್ತಾ? ಇನ್ ಕಂಪ್ಯಾರಿಸನ್ ವಿತ್ ಲೆಂತ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಬ್ರೆಡ್ತ್, ಲುಕ್ ಅಟ್ ದ ಹೈಟ್. ಲೆಂತ್ ಮತ್ತೆ ಬ್ರೆಡ್ತ್ ಗೆ ಕಂಪೇರ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಹೈಟ್ ನೋಡಿ. ಇನ್ ಕಂಪ್ಯಾರಿಸನ್ ವಿತ್ ಲೆಂತ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಬ್ರೆಡ್ತ್, height is comparable or negligibly small. In comparison with length and breadth, height is comparable or height is negligibly small. Height negligibly small adala in comparison with length and breadth. ಇದನ್ನ ನೋಡ್ರಿ, ಇದರ ಡಿಸ್ಟೆನ್ಸ್ ನೋಡ್ರಿ, ಇದರದ್ದು ಡಿಸ್ಟೆನ್ಸ್ ನೋಡ್ರಿ, ಇದರದ್ದು ಡಿಸ್ಟೆನ್ಸ್ ನೋಡ್ರಿ. ಹಾಗಾದ್ರೆ ಲೆಂತ್ ಮತ್ತೆ ಬ್ರೆಡ್ತ್ ಗೆ ಕಂಪೇರ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಹೈಟ್ ಬಹಳ ಕಮ್ಮಿ ಇರೋದ್ರಿಂದ ವಿ ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ನೆಗ್ಲೆಕ್ಟ್ ಇಟ್. ಈ ಆಬ್ಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಗೆ ಹೈಟ್ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಅನ್ಕೋಬಹುದು ನೀವು. ಯು ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಜಸ್ಟ್ ನೆಗ್ಲೆಕ್ಟ್, ignore, you can just ignore. It doesn't mean that this object doesn't have height. We are ignoring that height in comparison with length and breadth. So this object now has only 3 dimensions or 2 dimensions. This object now has only 2 dimensions or 3 dimensions? Has only 2 dimensions. Hagadre, if an ant walks on this plane now, ಈ plane ಮೇಲೆ ಒಂದು ant ಏನಾದರೂ ವಾಕ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಹೀಗೆ, how many coordinates of position of the ant are changing? How many coordinates of position of the ant are changing? ಎಷ್ಟು ಪೊಸಿಷನ್ ಕೋಆರ್ಡಿನೇಟ್ಸ್ ಚೇಂಜ್ ಆಗ್ತವೆ ant? You fix the origin at this point. Take this as x axis, take this as y axis. Okay, ant starts walking from here. Tell me how many coordinates of position of ant are changing? 2. Hagadre ant has now 2 dimensional motion. Suppose ant walks in this direction. Tell me how many position coordinates of the ant are changing with time? Ant walks this way. Only one position coordinate is changing. Ant walks this way. Only one. If the ant walks in this plane, ಈ ಬುಕ್ ಮೇಲೆ ಇದನ್ನ ನಾವು ಪ್ಲೇನ್ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. This is called x plane and this is called y plane. This is called xy plane. This entire plane is called as xy plane. If an ant walks this way, we say it has two-dimensional motion because two position coordinates of it are changing. Is the idea of two-dimensional motion clear? Is the idea of two-dimensional motion clear? Motion of an object in a plane. Idu now plane anta karitivi. Idu x plane, idu y plane. Motion of an object in a plane is called as motion in two dimension. Motion of an object in a plane is called as motion in two dimension. Two-dimensional motion ಆಗಿ ಎರಡು ಪೊಸಿಷನ್ ಕೋಆರ್ಡಿನೇಟ್ಸ್ ಚೇಂಜ್ ಆಗ್ತವೆ ಟೈಮ್ ಜೊತೆಗೆ. ಆಯ್ತಾ? ಹಾಗಾದ್ರೆ what is three-dimensional motion? What is three-dimensional motion? Motion of an object in space. Motion of an object in space is called as motion in three dimension. Or when an object moves in space, its three coordinates changes with time. When all three coordinates of a particle changes with time, then we say that particle has three-dimensional motion. When three position coordinates of a particle changes with time, we said that particle has three-dimensional motion. Example for three-dimensional motion noted. Suppose this is x-axis, this is y-axis, and this is z-axis. This is x-axis, this is y-axis, this is z-axis. Okay. Suppose a bird is flying here. Nam sutta irodunne space anta kariತೀವಿ ನಾವು. We are in a three-dimensional space. ನೀವು ಕೂತಿರಲ್ಲ ರೂಮ್, ಆ ರೂಮ್ ನಾಗ ನೋಡ್ಕೊಳ್ರಿ. At the corner of the room, you fix the coordinate axis. ನಿಮ್ಮ ರೂಮ್ ಒಂದು ಕಾರ್ನರ್ ಹತ್ರ coordinate axis ಫಿಕ್ಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ರಿ. ಆ ವರ್ಟಿಕಲ್ ವಾಲ್ ಏನಿರ್ತಲ್ಲ that will represent y axis, horizontal wall ಏನಲ್ಲ that will represent x axis, and the other wall will represent z axis. At the corner you can get three axes. ಬರ್ತದ ನೋಡ್ರಿ, ಒಂದ್ಸರಿ ಅಬ್ಸರ್ವ್ ಮಾಡ್ರಿ. ನಿಮ್ಮ ಮನೆ ಹತ್ರ ಅಲ್ಲೆಲ್ಲ ಕಾರ್ನರ್ ಇರ್ತಲ್ಲ ಮನೆ ಒಳಗೆ, ಆ ಕಾರ್ನರ್ ಹತ್ರ ಆರಿಜಿನ್ ಫಿಕ್ಸ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಮೇಲ್ಗಡೆ y ಆಕ್ಸಿಸ್, ಒಂದ್ ಸೈಡ್ x ಆಕ್ಸಿಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ರಿ, ಇನ್ನೊಂದ್ ಸೈಡ್ z ಆಕ್ಸಿಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ರಿ. ತ್ರೀ ಆಕ್ಸಿಸ್ ಬರ್ತಾವ. ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಯು ಗೆಟ್ ತ್ರೀ ಆಕ್ಸಿಸ್? ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಯು ಗೆಟ್ ತ್ರೀ ಆಕ್ಸಿಸ್? ಓಕೆ. ಹಾಗಾದ್ರೆ suppose a bird flies into your home. Suppose a bird flies into your home. Can you tell me how many coordinates are required to specify the position of this bird from the origin? Origin inda ee bird position ಹೇಳಬೇಕು ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಎಷ್ಟು coordinates ಬೇಕು ನಿಮಗೆ? How many number of coordinates do you want to specify the position of this bird? Three coordinates are required. I say the position coordinates of this bird are 5, 3, 4. 5, 3, 4. This means in order to find or locate this bird, I have to travel a distance of 5 meter along x-axis. Origin in the x-axis ಮೇಲೆ 5 meter ಬರಬೇಕು. From the origin, I have to travel a distance of 5 meter. ಅಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಮತ್ತೆ on the y-axis I have to travel a distance of 3 meter. 5 meter. ಅಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಮೇಲ್ಗಡೆ ಮತ್ತೆ 3 meter ಬರಬೇಕು y-axis. ಇವಾಗ ನಮಗೆ will we get the bird? From the corner of your home where you have fixed the origin, where you have fixed the origin, you have traveled a distance of 5 meter along x-axis. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಬಂದಿದ್ದೀರಿ, ಇಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಮತ್ತೆ 3 meter ಮೇಲೆ ಹೋಗಿ, you traveled 3 meters along y-axis. Do you find the bird there? ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನಮಗೆ bird ಸಿಗ್ತದಾ? Do you find the bird? No. ಅಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಏನು ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಹೇಳಿ? From this location you have to travel a distance of 5 meter along z-axis. Then you will find this bird. ಬಹಳ ಸಿಂಪಲ್ ಅದ. ಏನ್ ಮಾಡ್ರಿ, you just hold your pen in the hand. ನಿಮ್ಮ ಮನೆ ಹತ್ರ ಒಂದು ಕಾರ್ನರ್ ಫಿಕ್ಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ರಿ. ನಿಮ್ಮ ರೂಮ್ ನಾಗ ಒಂದು ಕಾರ್ನರ್ ಫಿಕ್ಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ರಿ. ಆ ಕಾರ್ನರ್ ನ ಆರಿಜಿನ್ ಅಂತ ತಗೊಳ್ರಿ. ಟೇಕ್ ದ ಕಾರ್ನರ್ ಇನ್ ಯುವರ್ ಹೋಮ್ ಆಸ್ ದ ಆರಿಜಿನ್. ಆ ಕಾರ್ನರ್ ಹತ್ರ 3 ಆಕ್ಸಿಸ್ ಪಾಸ್ ಆಗ್ತಿರ್ತಾವೆ, ಅಥವಾ 3 ಆಕ್ಸಿಸ್ ಆ ಕಾರ್ನರ್ ಹತ್ರ ಇಂಟರ್ಸೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗ್ತವೆ. If you can find 3 axes intersecting at that corner, it will be helpful. ನಮಗೆ ಅರ್ಥ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಈಸಿ ಆಗ್ತದೆ. Is it happening? At the corner, three axes must be intersecting. One is the x-axis, one is the y-axis, and the other will be the z-axis. Other will be the z-axis. More axis intersect ಆಗ್ತಿರ್ಬೇಕು. Okay. ಈಗ ನೀವು ಕೂತಿರೋ ಲೊಕೇಶನ್ ಹತ್ರ ಈ ಪೆನ್ ಹೋಲ್ಡ್ ಮಾಡಿ. Just hold the pen in this way. ಈಗ ಆ ಕಾರ್ನರ್ ಹತ್ರ ನಾವೇನು ಆರಿಜಿನ್ ಫಿಕ್ಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಲ್ಲ, ಅಲ್ಲಿಂದ ನನಗೆ ಈ ಪೆನ್ ಲೊಕೇಶನ್ ಬೇಕು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ, if I want to locate this pen from the origin, decide how many coordinates are required. Decide how many coordinates are required. ಎಷ್ಟು coordinates ಬೇಕಾಗ್ತಾ ನೋಡಿ ಈ ಪೆನ್ ಲೊಕೇಟ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ 3 coordinates are required. ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಈ ಪೆನ್ ನಮಗೆ ಸಿಗಬೇಕು ಅಥವಾ ಈ ಚಾಕ್ಪೀಸ್ ನಮಗೆ ಸಿಗಬೇಕು ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಆ ಕಾರ್ನರ್ ಇಂದ ನಾವು 3 ಡೈಮೆನ್ಷನ್ಸ್ ನ ಮೂವ್ ಆಗಬೇಕಾಗ್ತದೆ. ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಆ ಕಾರ್ನರ್ ಇಂದ ಎಕ್ಸ್ ಆಕ್ಸಿಸ್ ಮೇಲೆ ನಡ್ಕೊಂತ ಬರ್ಬೇಕು. ನೀವು ಎಕ್ಸ್ ಆಕ್ಸಿಸ್ ಮೇಲೆ ನಡ್ಕೊಂತ ಬಂದು ಅಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಮತ್ತೆ ಮೇಲೆ ಹೋಗ್ಬೇಕು. ವೈ ಆಕ್ಸಿಸ್ ಮೇಲೆ ಹೋಗಿ ಅಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಮತ್ತೆ how to travel along z axis, then you will locate this pen. You will be able to locate this pen. Sir, ನಾನು ಹೈಟ್ ಇದೀನಿ ನಿಮಗೆ ಸಿಗ್ತದೆ ಅದಲ್ಲ. ನಿನಗೆ ಈ ಆಬ್ಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಸಿಗಬೇಕು ಅಂದ್ರೆ ನೀನು ಎಷ್ಟು ಡೈಮೆನ್ಷನ್ಸ್ ನ ಮೂವ್ ಆಗಬೇಕು ಅದು ಇಂಪಾರ್ಟೆಂಟ್ ನನಗೆ. Into how many dimensions you have to move in order to locate this object, that is important. 3-dimensional motion antandre, this is a kind of motion where all 3 position coordinates of the particle will be changing with time. When a bird flies in space, how many position coordinates of the bird changes with time? How many position coordinates of bird changes with time? When a bird flies in space, how many position coordinates of it will change with time? 3 x, y as well as z. Suppose ಈ moment ನ ನಿಮಗೆ 3-dimensional motion ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ, I'll try to convince you once you come back to the college. ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ನನಗೆ ಇಲ್ಲ, I cannot show you the corner of that room. ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಕ್ಯಾಮೆರಾ ಫೋಕಸ್ ಮಾಡೋದು ಕಷ್ಟ ಆಗ್ತದೆ. 2-dimensional motion will be clear, 1-dimensional motion will be clear. ಈ 3-dimensional motion ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ನಾನು ನಿಮಗೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಕಾಲೇಜಿಗೆ ಬಂದ್ಮೇಲೆ I'll try to demonstrate it. ಆ ಇಮ್ಯಾಜಿನೇಷನ್ ಬಂದ್ರೆ it's good. Illa antandre we'll try to take up it again once you come back to the college, right? Do not bother too much about it. Ega, if the particle is somewhere here, we need 3 coordinates to specify its position. The particle and silver antandre x-axis ಮೇಲೆ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಡಿಸ್ಟೆನ್ಸ್ ಕವರ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಪಾರ್ಟಿಕಲ್ ಸಿಗ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಇಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಮತ್ತೆ y-axis ಮೇಲೆ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಡಿಸ್ಟೆನ್ಸ್ ಕವರ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು. ಮತ್ತೆ z-axis ಮೇಲೆ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಡಿಸ್ಟೆನ್ಸ್ ಕವರ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು. Then I will find the position of this particle. Right? So if 3 coordinates of position of particle is changing with time, then we said that particle has 3-dimensional motion. Now Sadyaka will not bother too much about 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional motions. First chapter is completely related with motion in straight line. We'll be treating only the motion of an object along a straight line in this chapter, right? Do not bother too much about 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional motion. At the next chapter nal bartude motion in plane antade. There we'll study in detail about motion in 2 and 3 dimensions, right? So motion of an object along straight line is called 1-dimensional motion. Motion of an object in a plane, like this is called 2-dimensional motion. And motion of an object in space is called as 3-dimensional motion. Motion of an object in space is called as 3-dimensional motion. Example for 1-dimensional motion is an object released from certain height. It travels along straight line. It's an example for 1-dimensional motion. Motion of a carom coin hit at an angle with the horizontal. The horizontal angle on carom coin. It will have 2-dimensional motion. Motion of a bird in space is an example for 3-dimensional motion. This is regarding the types of motion, right? We should now start studying the parameters of motion. I have told you, in kinematics we will not be dealing with the cause for motion. ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಓದಲ್ಲ kinematics ನಾಗೆ. Instead we will be studying about the parameters of motion. What are the parameters of motion? Distance traveled, displacement, speed, velocity, acceleration. These are considered as the parameters of motion. We'll be studying about these parameters in kinematics. So probably in the next class, we'll start distance traveled by a particle. We'll try to understand what is meant by distance traveled, what is meant by displacement, what is meant by speed, what is velocity, what is acceleration. That we'll learn from the next class. Idiಷ್ಟ ಏನಾದರೂ doubt ಅದ? What is one-dimensional motion? What is two-dimensional motion? What is three-dimensional motion? If three-dimensional motion could not be imagined at this point of time, ನಿಮಗೆ ಅದರದ್ದು imagination ಕಷ್ಟ ಅನ್ಸಿದ್ರೆ, I'll try to convince you the three-dimensional motion once you come back to the college. But one-dimensional motion and two-dimensional motion should be clear. Frames of reference clear ಅದ? Frames of reference. Frame of reference ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ it's a fixed location with respect to which motion of an object is described. ಒಂದು ಫ್ರೇಮ್ ಆಫ್ ರೆಫರೆನ್ಸ್ ನಾಗೆ ಎರಡು ಆಬ್ಜೆಕ್ಟ್ಸ್ ಇರಲೇಬೇಕು. ಒಂದು ಮೀಟರ್ ಸ್ಕೇಲ್, ಇನ್ನೊಂದು one is the meter scale and the another is in order to describe motion of an object we need a meter scale and a clock. We need meter scale and a clock, right? Okay, so this is regarding the introductory part of motion in straight line. From next class we'll start studying some of the parameters associated with motion of an object. Thank you, please. We'll continue in the next class.